Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, with the rumors that the league and the union might actually start trying to come to an agreement this week, we'll take a look at what such an agreement might look like. So, let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, subscribe in all those places and never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listening or watching, my name is Jeff Snider and my co-host is Vince Samperio. We're doing a split episode today, so Vince will be with you for the second half of the episode. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you, and we've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, which is a good thing, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button, as the kids say, and let's talk some Dodgers. As you can maybe tell if you're a regular listener, I am coming to you from a different location. I'm in a hotel room, and so my backdrop is different, my lighting is different, my microphone is different, and my camera is different. But the content is hopefully going to be the same high quality you've come to expect. I am in St. George, Utah this weekend watching my son play in a baseball tournament. My son hit a home run yesterday, which caused some angst in exactly one person who felt like because my son's team had a big lead, he should have gotten out on purpose. And my answer to that is my son is on a team that has 17 players, and he is one of the new kids on the team, so he's battling for playing time. And in our family, we don't watch fat pitches go down the middle just because it's a 3-0 count and we have a big lead. You hit it, and you hit it hard, and good things happen. So, to that guy whose name I've forgotten, in fact, whose existence I've forgotten, I send a hearty shove it to you and to the rest of you. I'm happy to be talking Dodgers with you today, or not specifically Dodgers, I guess. Hopefully this will soon become, again, a Dodgers-specific podcast. We end up talking a lot about league stuff in general, it seems like these days, and that's okay. But it'll be a lot okayer when there's actual Dodgers news to talk about. But it's Sunday as I'm recording this. I'm recording this on Sunday afternoon, and we heard a few days ago that starting on Monday, hopefully, the league and the union are going to start meeting regularly. We talked about that in Friday's episode. And so they've set themselves a deadline for a week from Monday, the 28th. That's kind of the deadline they've set for. We need to have an agreement in place by this time in order to start the regular season on time. And human nature being the way it is, I expect them to come to an agreement on the 28th. I think on the 27th, we'll probably be thinking, man, there's no way they're going to come to an agreement. And then they'll magically agree on the 28th. It's a game of chicken to see who blinks first, which might be mixing metaphors. Staring contest and chicken are two different games, but they're doing both of them at the same time, which is talented but not super productive. And so they are playing this game of staring contest chicken, and at some point when they actually are faced with the prospects of, oh, this is actually going to hit us in the pocketbook, they'll come to an agreement, and some side will be less happy than the other. Historically, it's always been the players who were less happy, who have gotten the worst end of the deal, and or at least the last couple CBAs, and Major League Baseball is aware of that, and I'm sure they're planning on that happening again. Hopefully they will come to an agreement. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that agreement might look like. There was a guy on Twitter who I had never heard of. He has a blue check mark, but he doesn't appear to be a baseball insider. But he says the playoff format is set. So while I'm taking this with several grains of salt because I have no reason to believe this guy knows what he's talking about, I'm going to talk about what he says is going to be the case because it's not unrealistic. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And so I want to talk about his idea, or the idea he shared. Basically, he said there would be 7 playoff teams from each league, and in each league you'd have the 3 division winners and 4 wild card teams. And the the team with the best record in the league would get a bye in the division series. The other two division winners, the division winner with the second best record, would pick their opponent from among the wild card teams, and then the division winner with the third best record would pick their opponent from the remaining three wild card teams, and then the other two wild card teams would play each other, and they would play each other in a 3-game division or wild card series, I guess. In a 3-game wild card series. So the wild card game would go from being 1 game to being a 3-game series, with all 3 games played at the home stadium of the team with the better record, so the higher seed. So the two division winners that didn't have a bye would host the 3-game best of 3 wild card series, and then the wild card team with the best record between the two wildcard teams that wasn't picked as an opponent, so most of the time it would be the best wildcard team, but not always. That team would host a best of 3 wildcard series. And so then everything else, I think, I didn't see in this tweet, he didn't address whether the division series would remain a best of 5 series or if it would bump up to a best of 7. I really like the idea of a wild card series, a best of 3 series instead of a single wild card game. As much fun as the wild card game was last year, it would have sucked if the Dodgers lost the game. And one game, anything can happen in one baseball game. A 3 games isn't, a best of 3 isn't significantly better, but it is better than a best of 1. Best of 7 is, I think most of the time in a best of 7 series, the better team is going to win. And by most of the time, I mean more than half the time. That's the definition of most of the time. I don't think it's a vast majority of the time, but I think 60% of the time, probably in a best of 7 series, the better team is going to win the series. I'm okay with that. I think in a best of 1 series, in a wild card game, it's very close to 50-50 because both teams are going to be somewhat evenly matched. They're both going to be good teams. And so it's a tough one. And so I like the idea of the wild card series. I would like to see the division series expand to a best of 7, just like the championship series and World Series are. But what I really like about this whole thing is it gives the owners the expanded playoffs they want without watering it down too much. I like the best record having a first round bye. It would only be a 3-day delay, so it's not going to make them rusty, but it gives them the opportunity to set up their rotation for the division series however they want it, which is definitely a perk of winning. And it adds 1 playoff team per league, which is, it waters it down some, but it's not terrible. It's not the worst. It doesn't affect the integrity of the game. When in 2020, when they had 8 playoff teams per league, so literally more than half the teams made the playoffs, you had teams with losing records in the playoffs. I don't like that. There's a dog in the hallway of my hotel. I did not like having more than half the teams making the playoffs. 7 isn't great, but it's okay. It's only 1 more than they currently have, 2 more than they currently have, I mean. But it kind of creates a little competitiveness. So I think it's a good compromise, basically what it boils down to. The owners get their expanded playoffs. The players don't have too much dilution of the postseason because the players' motivation here is they want teams to spend money to try to win. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit, about more ways to motivate teams to try to win. But if you have teams that are under 500 making the postseason, that tells owners, well, we don't need to spend that much to get to the postseason. But this way, it's still a big disadvantage to be the 4th wildcard team or the 3rd wildcard team, because then you're playing a wildcard series on the road. There's plenty of disadvantages to the teams who make the wild card that you still want to fight for the division, but the owners get their expanded playoffs, which means more playoff revenue, blah, 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 blah. And so I think that sort of thing would be a pretty decent compromise. I know there are some people who are against compromise in this CBA. You're firmly on one side or the other, but I think that a negotiation should be a compromise. If either side walks out completely happy, then it was a poor negotiation and probably not serving the best interest of the game, honestly. And so I like this compromise. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about two other things that I would like to see in the CBA that I don't know if they will actually be there. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, can I talk to you about Built Bar for a minute? Let me tell you, Built Bar is delicious. It is the best tasting protein bar in the world. They also have these Built Bar Puffs that are basically chocolate covered marshmallows that are also, believe it or not, healthy. A healthy marshmallow, who ever heard of such a thing? Everything Built Bar makes is covered in chocolate, and it's all low sugar, low carb, low calorie, high protein, high fiber, everything you want, none of the stuff you don't want. And the way they do it, they start with delicious, and then they try to figure out how to make it healthy, and magically they do it. So the flavor is always their starting point, which is why these things taste as good as a candy bar, if not better, and they're good for you. And magically, you can also get a discount on them. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15, and you will get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. I also want to talk to you about another sponsor that I use all the time, rockauto.com. If you own a car or ever need to buy auto parts, if you're still going down to the auto parts store, it's a silly thing you're doing, because Rock Auto exists. It's on the internet. All you do, sit down, go to rockauto.com, find your make and model of car. They will list all the parts that are available for it, and they're going to have what you need. It's going to cost less than you would have paid at the auto parts store. It's going to be the exact perfect part for your car. All you got to do is wait a couple days for the shipping. Totally worth the trade-off, especially because the auto parts store is probably going to have to order in your specific part anyway. This way, you do the ordering yourself. You pay a lot less. You don't have to go to an auto parts store. Everybody's happy except for the auto parts store. And honestly, who cares about them? I don't care. I'm happy because you use rockauto.com and you're a smart consumer and you're saving yourself money and getting quality parts. So all you got to do is go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. Okay, I am back. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple ideas that I wish were going to be in the CBA. I don't know if they're going to. It's not like they are totally off the table, but they're working on them. These are things that I think would improve baseball, improve the competitive nature of baseball, include the quality of baseball. And I have 1,000 ideas. Hashtag Jeff for commissioner. Make me commissioner. I will. I got all sorts of great ideas, but a couple that stand out to me right now. First one is the draft order. Right now, and I've talked about this before, but right now, the worst team in baseball gets the first pick in the draft. And so the best way to rebuild your team is to lose on purpose so you can draft the best players. It's how the Cubs got Chris Bryant. It's how the Astros got Alex Bregman and Carlos Correa, by sucking. And that is a backwards system, because every team can afford to sign free agents. Every team should be able to at least be somewhat competitive. Now, baseball is a zero-sum game. Every game, one team wins and one team loses. So you are still going to have some team that is the worst team in baseball. But there's something about the team being the worst in baseball on purpose rubs me the wrong way. I don't like it. I want, as a fan, when I go to the stadium, I want to see a team that's trying to win. And, you wonder why the Astros had no attendance back when they were terrible, because everybody knew they're not trying to win. Well, if you're not trying to win, why should I pay my hard-earned money to go watch you play? And for me, what it boils down to is right now, there's no benefit to a team to win 85 games, because 85 games isn't going to get you in the playoffs. And it's just going to put you in the, you're going to be the 18th pick in the draft or something. When if you instead win 61 games, you can have one of the first couple picks of the draft. So it's actually encouraging teams to be bad on purpose. Now, what I think they ought to do, I wrote about this several years ago. I know Jason Stark wrote about it recently, and the world thought that it was his great idea. But I know for a fact Jason Stark follows me on Twitter, and he probably saw my article. But anyway, and I wasn't the first one. I actually, former Cubs announcer Len Casper had tweeted about it several years ago, and that was when I first started thinking about it. It's basically reversing the draft order in a way. So the best team that doesn't make the postseason gets the first pick in the draft. and you go backwards. So the worst team in baseball picks near the end of the first round instead of at the beginning of the first round. That would motivate teams to try to be better. There's some things you have to work around. If you have a team that's like, okay, would I rather be the last team into the playoffs and not have a very good chance of winning it, or would I rather be the first team out of the playoffs and get the first pick? So you'd run into the temptation to lose on purpose there, which is why in my form of this thing, the draft order would go best team to not make the playoffs, second best team to not make the playoffs, worst team in the playoffs gets the third pick, and then third best team, fourth best team to not make the playoffs, and then second worst team to make the playoffs. So you go 2-1, 2-1 all the way down. That might have to adjust. That's based on there being 5 playoff teams, 10 playoff teams overall, 5 from each league. So if they do expand the playoffs, you'd have to adjust that a little bit, those calculations. But basically, the end of the first round would be the best team in baseball and the worst team in baseball. Best team doesn't need the top draft pick. Worst team doesn't deserve the top draft pick. That's the way my perfect draft would work. And then you'd have teams saying, you know what? Realistically, we're not going to win a World Series this year, but we're going to try to win as many games as possible because it is in our best interest draft-wise to do that. So they're going to go out and they're going to sign free agents. They're going to call up their young players who can actually help the team. All those things to improve the competitive balance of the game, to improve the competitive integrity of the game. That's what they're going to do, simply by reversing the draft order in that way. The other thing, and this isn't new or original at all, just pay the dang minor leaguers. And I'm not even coming from a moral standpoint. I know there's plenty of moral arguments to make that paying minor leaguers such poverty wages is wrong. I'm going to come at it from a purely practical standpoint, which is if you have players, minor league players are contractually obligated to stay in peak physical condition year round. If they have to work as substitute teachers and construction workers and Uber drivers, they aren't working out during those times. I mean, construction work, I guess it could be exercise, but it's not baseball exercise. They're not improving themselves physically, and they're definitely not improving themselves as ball players. But every organization could put out about $15 million and pay every minor leaguer $50,000 a year, which is enough to live on. So that in the off season, they can, maybe you work a part-time job. You want to supplement that a little bit, drive some Uber, but they can also spend 5 or 6 hours a day actually improving as ball players. During the season, they cannot be stressing about where's my next meal coming from. I've told this story before. When I was in high school, I used to go to Lake Elsinore Storm games, and I made friends with a bunch of the players, and they would leave me tickets because they got free tickets to the games. Most of them didn't have family around. They would leave me tickets, so I got into every game for free, but the deal was I had to give them the ticket stubs because on the back of the ticket stub, there was a buy one, get one free Western Bacon Cheeseburger coupon from Carl's Jr. And so their deal was, we'll get you free tickets, but we get the buy one, get one free Western Bacon Cheeseburger so that we can afford to eat. That's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. And things haven't gotten better since then. That was the 90s. We're 30 years off from then, and things are still just as bad. Pay the minor leaguers a living wage so that they can focus on being the best baseball players possible, because then they will improve. They will get better. Your team will be better. Some team, ideally the Dodgers, needs to figure this out and say, you know what? Yeah, we're giving every minor leaguer $50, $60, $70,000 a year, whatever it is. It's all pocket change to the billionaires. And the reason we're doing it, we can pretend it's to do the right thing, but we know the truth. It's so that the Dodgers can have a competitive advantage against the other teams that aren't willing to do that. Do it. Do it right now, Dodgers. If you're listening to this, Stan Kasten, I'm sure he's a regular listener. Make it happen, man. It's a competitive advantage just from a purely practical standpoint to pay your dang minor leaguers. That's all I have to talk about for today. Vince is going to be along in a minute. I'm not sure actually what he's going to talk about. Vince is preparing for his birthday coming up this week. His birthday is on Wednesday. He's going to be the ripe old age of 31. Vince is getting old. So he is off doing pre-birthday family stuff today. I'm in a hotel with my family, so I had to take advantage of this time when my wife and kids are off exploring to do this podcast. So, but Vince, he'll definitely have some intriguing Dodger stuff to talk about with you. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. And Vince will be along in a minute.
Football might be over for the season, but basketball is full steam ahead for both pro and college hoops. For all the latest odds, totals, play performance props to where the next coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the top spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. Not just basketball, betonline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC. Head to their website today on the laptop or mobile device, check it out, play around with it, and learn more about all the trends and action going on right now. Bet online where the game starts. Yo, 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 Dodger fans. Vince Samperio here to close out the episode. And we're going to talk. Jeff talked a little bit about what could go in the CBA or how the CBA is going to go down. I just want to talk a little bit about once the CBA does get signed. Let's just say it does get signed by that February 28th deadline. Then what's going to happen? And it's going to be absolute madness. I would imagine we're going to get guys, guys that are already near Arizona or Florida, but for the Dodgers specifically, Arizona. I'm sure they'll get there as soon as possible, as soon as they can, and start working out and getting ready to go. Most of these guys are already working out anyways, but it's a little bit different once you're in actual mode to get ready for a season. In terms of the actual players that are already on the roster, they're getting to Camelback Ranch as soon as possible. I don't think there's any Dodgers where this would affect, or at least not any major leaguers. I do know that there may be some visa issues for some other players because technically they're unemployed at the moment. So I guess if they had to renew the visa, they couldn't do so. So they'd have to wait until the CBA is officially signed, if I'm not mistaken, before they can get their visa to come over here. So I don't think it might affect a couple guys on the 40-man roster, maybe, but not in anybody that's particularly instrumental to the projected opening day roster. So I don't think there's any issues there. In terms of free agents, I think it's going to be a frenzy. I think everybody's going to try to sign right away. I have to imagine that a lot of deals are somewhat in place, or at least there's some kind of structure in place between a lot of teams. Maybe not the big name guys, but maybe a bunch of these lower tier guys. Like, I wouldn't be completely surprised if as soon as the CBA is over, the Dodgers announced a deal for Clayton Kershaw. Like, I can imagine that. I haven't got any true clarity on this, but I do believe that, like, Andrew Friedman can talk to Kershaw's agent. I don't think that's disallowed. That's technically, he can't talk to Clayton Kershaw himself, but I'm pretty sure he can talk to his agent. These GMs, they're probably talking trades already. If they're going to make any other trades, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some trades announced as soon as the CBA is done. They can build framework around that stuff, I would imagine, and have it ready to go once it's officially signed. And it's going to be a madhouse of frenzy. And I think some guys might end up taking deals that they didn't think they were going to take before, just based on the fact that if everybody's going crazy trying to sign people, and then somebody else signs where you thought you were going to sign, and now you don't have a team necessarily that wants you that bad, you might have to take a deal that you weren't ready for. But the other part is that there'll be a lot of guys that officially opened up their candidacy for 15 other teams to sign them. And that's, because of the universal DH, guys like Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber. Realistically, if they were thinking maybe AL team because of DH, now they can think the entire league. Now, teams are going to sign. That's kind of like signing an extra player depending on what team you are. The Dodgers can get away probably with not having to sign a specific DH, just based on the talent they already have on the roster. But some teams will, it's like signing one extra position player because it's somebody that's going to be in your lineup every single day. So, teams, guys like that, Schwarber, Castellanos. Anthony Rizzo is still pretty good on defense, but theoretically, I guess you could use him as a DH. Those guys are all going to have, a bunch of teams to think about signing with. I think that first week after the CBA signed, if it happens the 28th, that first week of March is going to be like I said, madness. Players trying to get to wherever their spring training facilities are. Players trying to get back into the country if they're living outside the country. Players trying to sign and find new teams, and maybe guys signing minor league deals and getting those spring training invites and trying to work their way on that way. And you're gonna have a bunch of teams trying to figure everything out. You're gonna have I don't know if I think the minor leaguers are still starting a month later, so I don't think it'll be too crazy in that aspect, but it's going to be absolute madness. It might be fun in the sense of like a baseball as a whole, because you'll get that free agency where everything's happening right away. I mean, we saw free agency kind of before that December 2nd soft deadline where a bunch of guys were signing, and it was fun. There's a bunch of new deals and big money, and teams were shifting the way they were negotiating or whatever the case is. And that was fun. And now we're going to get, I think, a round 2 of that where guys are going to be signing quickly, big money. It's going to be kind of like NBA and NFL free agency where it all kind of happens in a few days. And then there's a few stragglers after that kind of sign. And then after a week or two, but it's all going to happen that first week, because if you're not signing that first week, you're not in spring training with that team, and you're either going to hurt your chances of starting or playing for that team, or you're going to have to wait for an injury to open up a spot for them to be able to like really want you. So I think it's going to be fun from a baseball perspective in terms of that. We could see 15, 20 signings those first 2 days of once the CBA is over. And we could see guys like Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, guys like them signing, like Seth Schwarber, Rizzo, Freddie Freeman signing with the Dodgers. Hopefully, you never know. So that's kind of what to prepare for once the CBA is signed. I mean, at least on the Dodgers side, I don't expect it to be ridiculously crazy. I do think they'll bring Kershaw back. I do think, they'll try to get Freddie Freeman if they can. I don't know if they're going to make that trade for a more top tier starting pitcher. I do think they might sign a couple lower tier guys and try to work their way that way, like I mentioned before. And then maybe at the deadline, if they need a frontline starter, they can go get them and maybe pay a little less if it's, because it's half a season less. So I think they're going to go that route, but I know I wouldn't put it past Friedman to have a deal kind of in place that happens once this is all over, and once they can trade. There's the Dodgers have a lot of top tier talent. If anything, the Dodgers over this break really benefited because they had 5-6 guys in multiple top 100 prospect rankings. They had Keith Law's #1 farm system. They had a lot of guys that have really, caught on hype wise and become legitimate prospects. And, while we are already excited for guys like, Vargas and well, obviously Cartaya, who I think is untouchable at this point, but, the other part is that they could be used to get somebody like Luis Castillo, or maybe not Sonny Gray. I don't know if I give up any of those two guys, but, there are guys that are top tier now prospects, that are top 100 prospects that could be used in a bigger deal. Or, you go down to the next batch of guys that are right on the cusp of that top 100. And maybe you can use those guys from your depth rather than using from your quality, quality over quantity. Sometimes you go quantity over quality. And that's just the way it goes. So expect a lot to happen once the CBA sign. Expect the Dodgers. Kershaw for sure. Another starting pitcher for sure. Potentially Freddie Freeman, potentially a guy that could be more of a DH role, or another infielder that kind of pushes, maybe Turner and or Muncy into more of a DH role. And, Kenley Jansen's still out there. I don't think he'll re-sign with the Dodgers. Joe Kelly's still out there. I do think he could re-sign with the Dodgers just because he'll be cheaper and just because the Dodgers don't necessarily need a closer at the moment. But you never know. Kenley Jansen maybe had this break and was like, you know what? I love money, but if the Dodgers are calling and they're offering a little bit less money, maybe I'd take that. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can think about it as a player over this break. So we'll see what happens. I just know it's going to be fun as a baseball fan, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited, obviously, because baseball will be back, and we'll finally get actual news and things to talk about, but also because, it'll be similar to an NFL or NBA free agency that gets all the hype because guys are signing right away and it's a flurry of deals and everything else. So that's what's going to happen. that'll do it for today's episode. We will be back tomorrow talking, hopefully, positive negotiations between the players and the owners. I would imagine that they would meet for more than 15 minutes. They're going to start actively negotiating, and maybe we'll see a little bit clearer path to baseball returning because that's what we all want. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. We appreciate you. We'll be back to talk about those negotiations tomorrow. Make Locked On Bets your second listen of the day. It's your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling and hosted by your boy Q. Free and available wherever you get podcasts just like us. That's Locked On Bets. If you want to find us, we are on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Samperio. You can call and leave us voicemail or send us a text at 323-863-5625. Or you can send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Tell your smart device, play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.